Hey Patriot friends, welcome back to Culinary Rollers. Before we get into today's video, make sure to comment, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on your post notifications so you'll get notified when I post a new video. I post every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Thanks for 14 subscribers. Please get me to 1K subscribers. Let's get started with today's video. So today I am going to be reading Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I got this book the other day, Tuesday, at Lexington and Concord Visitor Center, like historical Lexington and Concord Visitor Center, across from the Battle Green, where the first battle of the American Revolution started. For those of you who don't know who Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was, he was a famous poet in the 19th century, like approximately around Abraham Lincoln's time or something like that. I don't know exactly what year he was born, but yeah. And he wrote about Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. Yeah. And Paul Revere never actually made it to Concord, but let's get reading this. Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is illustrated by Ted Moran. This is just a book about this is just a poem in the book on several pages. I've already read it once. It's very good. And I still can't memorize it. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the old North Church as the signal light, one if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with the muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore. Just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset British man of war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar, across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hole that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Excuse me. I have no clue why I'm yawning. I am not tired. I think this rain is making me a little drowsy. Meanwhile, his friend through alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears. I almost said cars. Eager ears. Till in the silence around him he hears a muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet. Here's a tricorn hat that they wore back in the 18th century. They're the British regulars. And he actually yelled, the regulars are coming, the regulars are coming. Fun fact. And he measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed to the tower of the old North Church by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the sombre rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade by trembling ladder steep and tall to the highest window in the wall. Where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roofs of the town and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath in the churchyard lay the dead, and their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still, that he could hear, like a continual tread, the watchful night wind as it went, creeping along from tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, all is well. A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour, and the sacred tread of only belfry and the dead. Of the lonely belfry and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and flows. Excuse me, my patriot friends. On the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then I am not very good at saying this word. Impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the Old North Church as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and gleam of the light, he springs to the saddle, and the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. So let me just explain something to you guys. I'm going to pause the book right here for a little bit, or for a couple seconds. So here's the thing I want to explain to you guys. One, if by land, one, if by the people, the British walking by land, or two, if by sea, which in this case, since it's two lanterns and the belfry of the Old North Church on the top, and like the steeple part, that means the two signals mean that they're coming by sea. One, if by land, and two, if by sea. So two, they're coming by sea, one, they're coming by land. So that's maybe you're a little confused, so I just want to clarify that. A hurry of hooves in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles and passing a spark, struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into the flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic meeting the ocean tides, and under the elders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the edge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. There's Paul Revere riding toward the people. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt that the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the giddled weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows, blank and brave, gaze at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. And by the way, where I said weathercock, I did not say a bad word. That's a part of the poem. But if I just said but if I just were to say the word cock, that would not be good. Here's Paul Revere. He was also a silversmith too, and you can visit his house in Boston in the North End. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock, and the twitter of birds among the trees, and it felt the breath of the morning breeze, blowing over the meadows brown. And one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In the books you have read how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall. Now, meanwhile, Sam Adams and John Hancock were hiding in the Hancock-Clark house. You can also visit that in Lexington. But Paul Revere's house is in Boston. But yeah, you can also visit those 2 places. I've been to those 2 places. And he's like, the regulars are coming, the regulars are coming. And that's why he said the regulars are coming, the regulars are coming. Because most of the citizens in those towns that at that time in our country's history was British, and he didn't say the British are coming or the redcoats are coming. He said the regulars are coming, the regulars are coming, because by that time, if you knew what the regulars meant, you knew that there were British people coming, British troops from England. The regulars are coming, the regulars are coming, the British are coming. No, not the British, the regulars. The regulars are the British. Another name for them, as they used to call them back in the 18th century, the lobsterbacks. Alright. Chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again, under the trees in the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire the load, to fire their muskets. Nobody knows where the first shot was shot, or who shot it, and it started at 5 a.m. in Lexington. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of dark and peril and need, the people will awaken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed, and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Alright, here's a picture of Paul Revere, and I'm going to read what it says. So it says, more about Paul Revere's ride. At the time of Paul Revere's ride, the 13 American colonies which stretched along the eastern seaboard were ruled by Great Britain. Over many years, the American settlers who had come mostly from Britain had grown apart from the faraway mother country. Some people in the colonies felt the Americans should govern themselves. They felt that taxes levied by the British and the laws that restricted what the Americans could do were unfair. They didn't like all the British soldiers who had been sent to Boston to keep order and put down any uprising that might break out. Paul Revere, a silversmith, was one of the Americans who spoke out and took action against the English king and his government, King George III. He and many others felt that war with Britain would surely come. On the cold, windy night of April 18, 1775, the British soldiers secretly headed out of Boston toward the nearby town of Concord, where they had heard the colonists' arms were being stored. The Americans had been expecting such a move, but they hadn't known which route out of Boston the British would choose, whether the British command would decide to ferry the soldiers across the Charles River or march them around its mouth. which means like around the edge. Paul Revere's friend Robert Newman was picked to watch the army's movement from the tower of the Old North Church. From there was a good view of the whole city before him. He saw that the British began to move in boats across the water. He signaled to Paul Revere and others who rode ahead of the soldiers and warned the Americans that the British were coming. The next morning, my Patriot friends, The next morning, the American Minutemen, so called because they could be ready to fight in a minute, were up and armed. They fired on the British soldiers, finally forcing them to retreat to Boston. This battle was the first in the American Revolution, which ended with the surrender of British General Charles Cornwallis to George Washington 6 years later. Here's the cover. Well, that's all for today's video. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment, like, and subscribe, and turn on your post notifications so you get notified when I post a new video. I post every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Thanks for 14 subscribers. Please get me to 1K subscribers. Love you. Peace out, my Patriot friends.